Okay, good evening. It's Lindsay from Freedom Media, WA, take two. We just had another usual gremlins jump into the system. Going to jump straight into it. We have in the studio here special guest, Federal Senator Pauline Hanson, of course the leader of One Nation, who is here in Perth for a whirlwind tour. Senator Hanson, Pauline, thank you very much for your time this evening.
My pleasure.
You've just come in from Queensland and we've just had a little bit of a technical difficulty behind the scenes, so I am going to jump right into it because I've got some questions to ask you. So sorry for that, watching at home. I think we're on track now, and you're over for, you've got a number of events that you will be attending in Perth. You're here until, I believe, Sunday or Monday?
Yeah, Mondays, yes.
I think, Pauline, tomorrow, potentially, the Keep the Sheep, you might be supporting something of that nature.
Not might, I will be, Lindsay.
Oh, you will be?
Oh,
yeah.
strongly.
What do you think
One
about
Nation.
that, Pauline?
Yeah, look, strongly. We've got to have live sheep export, okay? And if we don't, other countries are going to take it up. We have a good practice of looking after the sheep, the animals. The farmers do a fantastic job. Yep. And these countries want live sheep, the same as Indonesia wants live cattle. And you say, well, why don't we process the meat here? A lot of these countries can't take it because the amount of sheep or cattle that they need, they haven't got the refrigeration for it. So they like to slaughter the sheep or the cattle when it suits them, when they need it. And who are we to say, you know, if the farmers here are quite happy, they're selling their product. If you don't sell them live sheep, we shut down the export industry here. You're going to have so many regional communities will suffer. The farming sector, you're going to see people move out of the area. Communities will shut down. Schools will shut down. Money to the economy, and Western Australia has a big live sheep exports. Common sense.
It is common sense. You just it staggers belief to think that the labour industry, you know, Federal Senator Murray Watts has said it was sustainable about 3 years ago. Now it's not. And in addition to the live sheep export, we have the grain. You know, Western Australia provides a significant amount of grain to our eastern states farmers in times of droughts and things like that. Of course, farmers here in Western Australia, grain cropping is viable on the back of the live sheep export. On its own, it's not, because it's the two feed into each other. So it'll have a huge impact. So you'll be supporting West Australian farmers tomorrow, which is fantastic, I guess.
Oh, no question about it whatsoever. And this Labor Party, I am so frustrated with them. They are not supporting the farming sector. And when I was in Parliament, they supported me on saving the, and I know you haven't got a lot of dairy over here, but saving the dairy industry to give them the fair farm gate price for milk, which I was pushing for. Labor supported me then with it. Now they're in government. I've gone to Murray Watt and I said, will you support the dairy industry? Done nothing about it. So what they tell you when they're in opposition and then they were in government, totally two different things. I'm sick of these politicians and I'm sick of these people that are leaders of this nation now who lie to the people purely for the vote and don't carry through with it. It's on both sides. Everyone's had enough of it.
They have had enough, and I guess you know, over the last sort of 3-4 years, there's been a bit of an awakening in terms of politicians, you know, and the lies that they're saying. People are starting to see more and more of the impact of this, and here we are. We end up with these type of decisions, which will absolutely cripple the West Australian economy, an economy which is touted to be the strongest of the nation. We are in an absolute deficit, a budget surplus, I should say, not a deficit like the Australian budget. Pauline, you have registered One Nation to participate in the state election come March next year. Are you able to provide an update as to the Australian Electoral Commission, who's a different animal compared to the West Australian Electoral Commission compared to the AEC? Are you able to shed any insight as to where the registration for One Nation in Western Australia is?
Well, as far as I've been told that the registration is fine. We put in the paperwork for it, and this is why it's imperative that we have to have membership. Membership makes us viable to stand in the election. If we don't have membership, then we can't stand people under the banner of One Nation. So this is why people, if you're listening, please get behind One Nation. Please become a member. Makes us viable to actually then stand candidates in the election to give you the option to actually vote for someone other than the two major political parties. And that's why it's so important. Look, you'll only get good government if you have got good opposition. And when you've got them both lined up, pushing the same policies and agenda, you've got no one else to vote for. So you're stuck with what they offer you, and then they take you for granted. Until you got someone like myself and other, you know, the people in One Nation, that is really going to be a voice for you. You have to make sure that we're here and registered in the state so that you can actually vote for One Nation.
The importance of the voting, I guess, not only in Western Australia but across the state is quite important. And I do want to just put a quote to you in Sky News recently. You were quoted talking about why keep voting for the same idiots all the time, yes. Because we're getting into a bigger mess year after year. As I've already mentioned during our technical issues, we're talking about we're $100 million away from $1 trillion debt across Australia. I mean, it's a mind-blowing number.
Well, I hope people understand $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars. Every $1 billion is 1,000 million. So just look at those figures, and that's what we're facing. You know, you said that Western Australia has a budget surplus, but that's only a surplus in your budget for this year. Is there a debt for Western Australia? Because Queensland or the federal government have said, oh, we put out a budget surplus of $9 billion. That's only the budget surplus. It's like saying to people, okay, your income to your household is, say, $600 a year. Well, what you're saying, this is federal government, I'm just reducing it down so people understand,
yeah.
Okay? So you got $600 income into your household a year. And what you've done in that budget surplus, you've been able to manage to save $9 out of that $600. That's what your budget surplus is. But they don't tell you that you're owing another $200 to the bank. So there's a difference between a deficit and a surplus. Surplus is only the budget, what you've spent that year out of money you've brought in as taxes. But then they're borrowing other money, which means the deficit that we have. So that's where your $900 billion deficit is, the federal government. That $9 billion surplus is just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I think to put that into perspective, I was talking to some of the team here and saying that if one of the team was to have a child, you know, in 9 months' time, and their children have children, that those children, you know, their great-grandchildren will still not be able to pay down the debt, this number.
I tell you what I heard years ago, Lindsay, and when I was in Parliament, 9 people that I was first elected in 1996, and at the time it was called debt for equity. So we actually meaning that we go into debt by a certain amount, that whoever we owe the money to, which we're borrowing from other countries, that they will come and look for their money. Now, if we haven't got the money to pay them back, will they take our resources? Will they take our land? Will they take our fishing rights? Who knows?
Who knows?
So it was always called debt for equity. That's what's important, that we must pay down our debt. I don't want to be beholden to anyone, and we may have to do it tough for some time. But, you know, we're paying, in the last year, we've paid $19 billion in interest alone. Can you imagine what that $19 billion could have done? I mean, I look at some of the posts and media statements that come through from all the different people. I think you did one recently, $30 million, all hat, no houses, and for Stephen Miles in Queensland. It's probably no difference here. I mean, they've relaxed planning bylaws to allow people to put granny flats in their backyards, something that the local councils would not have contemplated, you know, even a couple of years ago. But that's not a fix to building homes and building houses. They need to, you know, it needs capital, as you've said. The money Lindsay, it can happen out there if you gave the right investment to people that want to invest and build houses. A lot of people are getting out of investment of owning houses themselves because government taxes. Like I said, you can only you can only, the government must cut back their spending, or they've got increased taxes. And they're increasing taxes all the time on the general public. That's a lot of people getting out of businesses, they're getting out of investments. They don't want to because they don't know what the government is going to do next. And people had a gutful of it.
I think, Pauline, we're sort of, we're coming in for a state election here in Western Australia, hence we will see One Nation here, because previously there was Colin Ticknell and there was Robin Scott, who were members of One Nation going back to 2016, I believe, you know, up to 2019. And so you're looking to reinvigorate One Nation, not only in Western Australia, but across the nation. We're going to see within a short period of time a state election and a federal election where potentially One Nation will have an opportunity to give the representation that you're talking about.
Yeah.
When you say voting for the same idiots all the time, I guess the importance of making that vote count is something that I guess I covered a lot of the federal politics coming into the election here in Western Australia in 2021. And Pauline, what I saw, if you sort of look at Liberal Party, the 6 inner seats in Western Australia, they just didn't preference Pauline Hanson One Nation at all. The 9 rural seats, which is the back of the ballot paper, they preference One Nation at number 6. And then when you look at the noise and the distraction, I guess from an old sparring partner is in Rod Cullerton from Great Australia Party.
Yep.
And we had in Western Australia, we had an environment where we had Great Australia Party with Rod Cullerton, we had Judy Weilerman leading Australian Federation Party, we had Michelle Kinsella that was behind the Australian Informed Medical Options Party, that were touting this vote for freedom-friendly minor parties. But I guess where I'm sort of going with this is Paul Filing, who you had as #1 ticket here in Western Australia, he narrowly missed out on that 6th Senate position. So West Australians got Fatima Payman at the expense of the divided vote amongst those 3 minor parties who in themselves were not preferencing One Nation. So what do you say?
No, that was basically the Liberal Party. See, the Liberal Party did that to me. They wouldn't preference me in 6 of those seats.
Which is evidenced by in the 6 inner cities, they just didn't preference you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you have these left-leaning, which is Dean Smith, and I also heard it was Linda Reynolds. So they were the ones who said not to give One Nation preferences, the same as Maurice Payne in New South Wales.
Yes.
Liberals wouldn't give us preferences there, or South Australia. And yet we've just missed out narrowly in winning that last seat. So the Libs have handed it to the Greens, and the last seat here in Western Australia to the Labor Party. It would be a totally different makeup of the Senate if they had preferences. But the Libs and the National Party, get this right, not only Labor doesn't preference One Nation, but the Libs and the National Party, who I've worked with constantly all the time, because I had the balance of power under Turnbull and also Morrison, that we worked with them. We actually improved. One minister said to me, she said, Pauline, it's good working with you. She said, we normally have good policy, but you make it better because the research and effort that we put into it. And we talked to all the interested parties to come up with something that is going to work for the Australian people. And that's why they change it, because they need my vote. This is where it's important to have the balance of power, but you do it in a well-managed way, and you don't throw your weight around. You actually have to use it wisely to make sure it's benefiting the Australian people. And that's what we did. But they were so bloody minded that they had to get rid of me because I'm a threat to them, because One Nation's taken their votes. If they did the job properly, people would stick with them and vote with them. What has the National Party done for the farming sector here? What has the Liberals really done for business? They're all left-leaning now in the Senate, and I am disgusted at the way that they vote. I'm trying to put a stop to gender dysphoria. What's happening to our kids in our educational system? One day be a girl, next day be a boy. Take these puberty blockers and hormone treatment or having surgeries. Guess what? They voted against it. 6 of the Libs in there voted against it.
Well, and I think you saw something similar with Ben Dawkins, with him introducing the motion that biological sex is a fact.
Of course it is.
You had all Labor voting that motion down, and Liberal walked out of the chamber on the vote.
Because they're too gutless, and that's what we got. There are too many gutless people in there. They're not standing up for their convictions. They're all party aligned, that they're just voting with the party. We need people with conviction to stand on principle what they believe in and fight for the Australian people. And that's what you get with One Nation, okay? Because if you don't feel the way that I do, don't be a member, don't be a candidate for One Nation. Because I want people that really have this country at their heart and the people, because people out there deserve better than what we've got. This is not the country that I grew up in. And I'm so disgusted with these politicians. They're more interested in countries overseas, sending money overseas without looking after the homeless, the veterans, the farming sector, our kids, the future generations. It's disgusting what's happening.
I think to break this down into Western Australia and just how important that 6th Senate seat would have been, as you mentioned, for the balance of power, had that gone to Paul Filing, which he was running for One Nation. You'll take Liberal out because I've said inner city, they didn't preference you at all. Yeah. Rural areas, they preference you number 6. But when you have the distraction and the noise from these freedom-friendly minor parties that are forming a co-op and essentially working against the likes of One Nation and also the United Australia Party, and with all of that there, you're talking about, Paul Filing got just under the number of 3 people together on primary votes, but double the number after preferences. Had those people voted for the likes of One Nation, we would have been looking at a 6th Senate position. And I guess the importance of that is with the electoral boundary reforms in Western Australia, we're now picking up a 7th senator position. Of course, that would be something that would be of particular interest to yourself.
7th senator position? Yeah. No, there's only 6. There's only 6 senators.
Yeah,
every. That's right. 12 senators in every state.
Yep.
And every election there's 6.
Okay.
So it's not. So federally it doesn't change. So it's possibly maybe changing in your state, and you're talking about the upper house in the state. So it's not federally.
No. I'm talking about federally. My understanding was because of the electoral reshuffling over east to keep that balance, because they've lost a couple. They're now reallocating because of the population growth in Western Australia.
They can't do that, Lindsay.
Okay.
Under the Constitution.
Oh, well, thank you for...
No. They can't. You can't make it 7 Senate seats in Western Australia. Under the Constitution, every state has to be treated equally, and there's 6 senators in every state. Same as Tasmania. It's only got 500,000 people, 350,000 voters, and yet they've still got 12 senators. The same as every state. It's only the territories that have 2, but every state has to have equal number of senators, which is half the number of House of Rep seats, 76 senators.
Yeah, my apologies for misinterpretation. Thank you for setting the record straight there, Pauline. What would you say to the people that do a donkey vote or a protest vote or don't vote at all in terms of, the value of that vote? I mean, how do you, get those people to engage? If the major parties can't do it, how do you see One Nation looking to...
Well, they've thrown their democracy out the window, and because
so you either want democracy,
they are, because a lot of people,
or you don't.
That's right. A lot of people around the world would dearly love to have the freedom that we have and choice of who they want to represent them on the floor of Parliament. May not be the best system in the world, but it's the one that we have. And it tells me of their pure ignorance, because a lot of people don't get involved in politics. So when you talk to them, people come up to me and they say, oh look, I support you, but I don't agree with all your policies. And I'll say, well, which one don't you agree with? Oh, I can't remember. So that's an excuse to me. They don't follow it. They may support me. They heard from the last person, they watched something that I said. But I say to people out there, we're talking about Australia is your home. So it's like someone else coming in and telling you how to run your house, or would you allow it to happen? You want to have a say in that. No different to your country, no different to who you elect into the federal parliament to represent you, because they're making decisions based on your future, things that you're going to be governed by, dictated to. So you're throwing your democracy out the window. Think about this. Would you rather go to a country that has a dictator? You've got no say, you're controlled, And by not voting, taking an interest, you are actually handing it over to become a country that you'll be dictated to.
It is, well, and there would be a sense that people would feel over the last sort of 3 years that we've probably experienced some elements of that.
Yes,
and
with the COVID and the way you were controlled, borders shut and everything like that, you couldn't leave your household. So this is no different. So people need, you know, it really frustrates me. We're talking about people's livelihoods, their standard of living, their way of life, and all this that goes with it. Yet they seem to be more interested in making sure they watch the footy match. They know who their players in the footy games are, but they couldn't tell you who the politicians are. Oh, you're all tarred with the same brush, that's what we hear all the time. But we're not.
And I mean, one thing that I will say is that if we're talking about in terms of commitments and things like that, you're here tonight, you're honouring from your staff in your office that a commitment was made. Next time you were in Western Australia, you would sit down and do a slow chat with us. And to your office, your word, here you are. So I guess you can't judge any more in terms of true to your word than that. So from my viewpoint, thank you very much.
It's always been my word's my bond, Lindsay, and unless something drastic happens, that type of thing, if I give my word to someone, you know, I like to keep it, and that's what I try to do with the Australian people too.
And that's pretty much, I guess, what would be in store for those that do want to get behind One Nation in Western Australia, and hopefully very soon the electoral registration will come through. Pauline, you mentioned that about the surplus and the difference between the surplus and the debt balance in Western Australia. We've had a couple of incidents here in the West in the last couple of weeks, some tragic incidents with waiting times in public hospitals and ambulance ramping, which is an issue that is happening across, but it seems to be, it's on the rise, and it's not exponential,
yep.
But it's a growing and significant problem. I mean, just a couple of days ago, you had a patient with known renal failure that went in for another condition, and he was ramped in a corridor at Joondalup Health Campus, you know, for over 6 hours, given some medication with no follow-up in between that time. Where do you sort of see how do you propose to keep or increase the accountability for the public health system, say for those here in Western Australia?
Right, what's happening, same right across the whole country. Ramping is, you haven't got that yourself over here, it's happening throughout the whole country. So there's quite a thing that needs to be done. What I would like to see, federal government gives the states funding for it. The states will take off about 20% of that before the money flows to the hospitals. What I would like to see is the hospitals set up their own hospital boards. It is not run by the bureaucrats, but by their own hospital boards. Funding goes directly to the hospitals. We lost a lot of professionals in paramedics, doctors, nurses and everything, professionals over the COVID. We've never recovered from that. So that's another problem that we have. Some people can't, you know, even get jobs back to this day because of the COVID. They're still being penalised over it, and that is wrong as well. What you also need to do, what's happening is a lot of the aged people are kept in hospital beds because they've got no place to go to. That's a big problem. So they're taking up the beds that sick people should be having, not aged people. So that should be addressed and put them into another facility where they can be cared for, not in hospitals. Hospital beds are for people who are sick. Should be there.
With that said then, do you see, say, for giving funding directly to the hospitals, and I see the merit in that because it will allow those that are running hospitals to put the resources where they need them most.
Correct.
One of the issues, I mentioned this issue a couple of days ago, there was an incident last week, a tragic incident of an 18-month-old child that went in, was misdiagnosed, the next day deceased, given a couple of Panadol, told to go home. You know, because of, I guess, the shortage in the hospitals, pressure on staff, so on and so forth. But in Western Australia, we have, for example, the Joondalup Health Campus, where these two incidents have occurred. It's a privately owned hospital, but it has a public emergency department and public wards. What we're finding in Western Australia is their KPIs don't feed into the state governments like your Royal Perth, your Charlie Gardner hospitals. So the numbers, the facts, the figures aren't being reported as to the true representation. Do you think that that may increase the problem if money goes to the boards and you have more privatisation of?
Look, I don't think so. If the boards are run by the hospitals, and of course the monies will be spent where it's needed for those hospitals, you've got to also look at, because there's been such a shortage of doctors. Look, I was talking to a doctor, and he's on the board, and he's talking to these people who are coming from overseas who are doctors and applying for positions out here. He said a lot of them can't even speak English. And he said the trouble is, he said, over the period of time, because they're not getting enough that are applying for these positions from doctors here, they've lowered the standards. So it's actually been lowered quite a bit to what it used to be. So we need to look at who we are actually putting in these positions from these overseas doctors that are coming here. Do they have the qualifications to be working here in Australia? Or are we that desperate they're bringing in people that shouldn't be working in our hospital system, in the health system? And you know, there's a lot of things that we need to look at. Bureaucrats, you know, I don't trust a lot of these bureaucrats and the decisions they're making. We've got pathetic ministers that hold portfolios who don't even know what they're talking about. And they're actually listening to the bureaucrats and taking every word that the bureaucrats tell them as that's the way it's got to be done. So until we get competent people to be head of these portfolios as ministers, and I'll tell you nothing while I'm at it, I'm sick and tired of tokenism. I'm sick and tired of actually giving jobs to women because they're women. Someone else out there who may be a man can do a far better job. Stop the tokenism. That's what we're in a hell of a mess, because people should not be doing these portfolios and the jobs, and it's all tokenism, and I'm sick and tired of it.
So Pauline, you would be seeking candidates in Western Australia, I guess. So that said, you're looking to de-gender, genderise that particular statement. It's the best person for the position.
Always has been.
So,
okay?
So no quotas. If you've got the skill set.
My party doesn't do quotas, right? If you've got the skill set, yes, you are. You're willing to work, and you are willing to stand up and have a voice for the people of Western Australia. Please contact the office. Go to the One Nation website, WA One Nation website, and put in your intentions or become a member. And those people who are members, please sign your forms and get it back to us. That's what the Electoral Commission keeps harping at us about. You've got members, but they're not signing the forms. And it's all these bits and pieces, it's constantly that we've got to jump these hurdles all the time to comply with it. They're trying to stop us all the time.
And I think if you look at the recent West Australian electoral reforms that have been put in place by ex-Premier Mark McGowan, and you're talking about bureaucrats, they've essentially weaponised the bureaucrats to do away with the minor parties. And I mean, I wouldn't say, One Nation sits somewhere in between. You're not looking to form government, although that would be nice. It's the balance of power. That's where the difference is that I'm suggesting that you're saying you can make that difference. We can't have this guillotining. We can't have this zero debates on very important things, laws that are impacting on people's lives, just continuing day after day, week after week in Parliament. So they can go into the West Australian website, One Nation. You've got
put your interest up to become a candidate. Nothing to change, and people, take a stand. And if you think you've got it, and you have the passion for it, and you want to be interested and represent people, fine. You might be the person I'm looking for. And it can be very rewarding. I've been a member of Parliament. Things that I've done for people and assisted them and saved the farming sector or the veterans, got them their payouts, or stopped people from being deported out of the country. And, there's so many things that just those little things, you can make such a difference to a person's life.
Look, I can say, from a personal viewpoint that I was actually due to give evidence in the family law inquiry here in Western Australia. Back in March 2020, but unfortunately the COVID shut that down. Western Australia was one of the last states. You've always been an advocate for fairer family law system, not trying to make it a gender issue, but it tends to particularly dominate and handicap men seeking to see their children, and I certainly made a submission which was accepted, and I was due to give evidence in that inquiry. And these are, core values, I guess, that you're sort of looking at for that fair. you know, to just make a fairer system. I did want to talk to you, you know, some time ago about some of the laws that got rammed through just recently in federal parliament to do with family law. I mean, if you're talking about dividing the core family unity, then that's it. That's what's happened.
Shared parental responsibility. That hearing, that's what I got up. I got that family law inquiry up in the Senate.
Absolutely.
So that was through my push, constantly pushing them for it.
Yep.
So
Scott
it was
Morrison promised and committed to that, because you were pushing, I think, from my memory, at least 5 years before that actually happened.
I've been pushing since 1996, first elected Parliament, because it was the biggest thing across my desk, or any members of Parliament's desk. A lot of them don't even know what's going on. And we had that inquiry. Do you know that there's, of 10 from the lower house and the Senate that were on the inquiry, only 3 of us had been through a divorce or separation. So the others had no idea what they were talking about. And you have one member of Parliament, males, made a comment. I've got to tell you this so you viewers know this. He sat in the meeting there and he said, Labor, mind you, and he said, oh, the women are best parents, not the men. I said, you're kidding me. And he said, no, men don't make better parents. Women should be parents of the kids, and the child should be with the mother. And I said, I've got 3 sons, and I tell you what, I've watched them with their children. I said, I tell you what, they are fantastic parents. Even with the babies, you know, little babies, changing the nappies, feeding them, and everything like that. And you know, I just could not believe what he said. And he's a man who's never done it by himself. His wife's done everything. But that's the attitude that they have. And so many people out there, I have men coming up to me when I'm doing my shopping, and they tell me their experiences of not seeing their children and what they're going through, and they're actually got tears in their eyes. Or you try and deal with people, my staff tell me all the time, they're taking calls from men mostly who ring up suicidal. And we've actually tried to help them get over this, and we give them hope that, okay, things may change, because I won't give up fighting for these men. But it's not only men, it's women as well that I've spoken to have also lost their children. And I get so annoyed people out there, because your selfishness, your marriage may have broken down. You brought children into the world. They have every right to their mum and their dad, unless they're a nasty, horrible person that abuses the child. But you can't deny them the right to see that children, or the grandparents, as for that matter. Yeah, which is something that you've advocated. You've taken gender out, although it does, as I've said, it does predominantly tend to impact on men. But you just want that fairer parental rights. And you've quoted, you know, international Hague conventions and things where this government 6 months ago went against all of that to break apart the family unity. It's an absolute tragedy. I guess something that you know, a number of people would be thanking you for. I haven't given up. I'm not giving up. Because I'll tell you what, if the coalition government gets back in, I've got the balance of power in there. You know, they said to me, you know, I was going to get a special task force set up, and the coalition promised me that, and that was just prior to the election. Do you know, they said they came and said to me, since Labor's been in there, they said, oh, we're sorry, we didn't set up that task force. Wow, Labor? Yeah, no, the coalition said, they said, we're sorry, we didn't set up that task force, what you actually were pushing for. Yeah. And the whole thing has to be investigated into child support. That's a big issue with this, that a lot of parents withhold the kids from the other parent purely for the child support they get out of it. It is something that is weaponised, and as you say, you're dealing with bureaucrats that have never been divorced or separated or had those issues, and I guess unless you've walked in those shoes and you've experienced that, it's devastating. I mean, I'd say the Child Support Agency has more powers than the tax department. They certainly do. They can destroy lives. It's the children that suffer. Really, they do. You've got loving parents. If you've got a loving father, a loving mother, why shouldn't the children be with him and have that connection with him? I've seen all the psychologists' reports, you know, coming out from around the world in America, that type of thing. A child is better if they do have connection with their mum and their dad. You may be separated, but to have that connection with them. We have in Western Australia, Paul, and you may be aware, we've had a recent tragedy that involved a separation, and 2 people were killed as a result of that. The Cook government has come out and talked about increasing domestic violence laws. They're talking about coercive control and things like that. And there's a lot of good things, and there's reasons, you know, for that to be implemented.
if you're a lawful firearm owner and there's a complaint of domestic violence, you're now looking at the Cook government introducing seizing firearms from people just on that basis. So no longer are you presumed innocent, you're judged guilty then and there.
Yeah, they take the firearm off you. Yeah, I know. It's just a way of getting rid of the firearm. So using that as an excuse to actually take firearms off people. If someone is intent on murdering someone, okay, they'll use a baseball bat or they'll use a knife. There's more murders by stabbings than what there are firearms. So if someone's intent and they've had enough, they will. Go to the cause of why we have this problem. Do you know that on the lawns of Parliament House, the end of last year, I went out because you had all these Lone Fathers Association, all these other organisations that were there. There was 2,500 boots of men and boys on that lawn.
I think
just one bootish. That's men and boys who had suicided. So do we ever do an investigation into why they are suiciding, why they're taking their lives? You know?
Yeah, it is the elephant in the room. We're looking at, you know, about 21 men a week on average take their lives because of various different different reasons, yet it's just not discussed to the same level. And it seems to be, if you're male, you're branded a terrorist almost, you know, that you're a horrible person. And it really does strike at the family unity and I mean it has a huge impact.
Look, Lindsay, I had my second marriage I know what domestic violence is about, okay? And I'm not going to go into detail, but it hasn't left me bitter. I've had a fantastic father, brothers, uncles, cousins, you know, men in my life that I've known. And you know what? Just because my experience from a second marriage, I don't carry on and treat all men that way. Most of the men out there are, you know, loving, caring people. Yes, you have the odd apple that's out there, by all means, but you also have it with women. And 25% of domestic violence is attributed to women. Filicide is more attributed to women. Do you know one child dies every 2 weeks through homicide? Or every 2 weeks in Australia? Wow, and do you know filicide? This is what people don't understand.
Yeah,
Stop blaming men. In filicide, government stats between 2001 and 2012, of 284 of deaths, children's deaths, 76% were attributed to filicide, which is death by the parent. So 46% were attributed to the mother and 29% by the fathers and 14% by the stepfather. And that's the problem that we have. Stop blaming men. Stop band-aiding and thinking this is the way to deal with it. Go back to the root cause of it. And you know, people who lie in court, there has to be perjury. You've got to lay charges. Don't use the kids as pawns. There's many ways that we can deal with it. And, you know, but they're not prone to do it.
This will be an issue with the proposed laws that Roger Cook is implementing. And it is used, a violence restraining order is weaponised in the, for access to the children to either gain or deny access, mainly deny. And then you find once proceedings are filed in the family court, then all of a sudden the person who makes out the violence restraining order doesn't turn up for the hearing, or it's proven to be malice or vexatious, but there's no consequences in relation to that.
That's right. That's my argument about it.
That's a huge problem.
And this should be all sorted out in another court before it goes to prove if it's false allegations. Deal with it in court before it goes to the family law court. And I'll tell you another thing, people who actually have a blue card, police officers, that type of thing, or people who work with children, domestic violence order, you lost your job.
Well, you can't be an operational police officer if you can't carry all your full accoutrements, because it's a workplace safety issue as well. And
police officer any job dealing with false allegations. So if you hold a blue card, there are so many repercussions on people out there from these false allegations, but we're not dealing with the people who are giving false allegations. And one judge, David Collier from Parramatta Court, after 14 years in the court, retired judge from the family law court, said the number of women that lied with sexual abuse of their children, he said it was terrible.
Almost an epidemic. I think I recall reading that article. I guess so there is hope there. The family law inquiry, if you get that balance of power, you will be pushing that. That's absolutely fantastic news. That should be enough for people to say that we need to ask these questions. We need to have a deeper dive into these issues.
We need a royal commission, because after that inquiry they had last time, left to the politicians that have no idea what they're talking about. You can't leave the decisions with there. Yes, I know. But COVID was the problem that we had, and the coalition lost government. But anyway, I know where it needs to be dealt with to actually bring justice for all Australians and the grandparents out there that may be watching this. They're missing seeing their kids. It does, family, all family.
Paulina, I'd like to close just on two things. I am trying to keep things to Western Australia, which is a good thing. But I just think your media release the other day, and I think it does warrant just a further explanation directly from yourself, and that is the Paris Agreement. And for people to actually predominantly understand the issue that China, who produces 30-odd+% of the world's emissions, yet they have no interest in the Paris Agreement. But Australia is full on, we have committed. Peter Dutton saying perhaps no, we might walk this back. There was some comment the other day, he was saying potentially Labor will not achieve their climate targets, but he's still promising or committing to net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
So,
look, it's impossible to meet our targets, and that's the case. A lot of people haven't done their research. There's too much fear-mongering about climate change that is actually happening. Of all the carbon emissions in the world, there's always been carbon, all right? So some levels over the millions of years, it's higher than other times. Carbon is a necessary gas. It's 0.004% of all the gases in the world. So mostly carbon comes from our oceans and from the soil, 97% of it. We can't control that.
And we don't get crops without carbon.
3% is supposedly from the humans. That's all we are. So how are we going to control it when most of it comes from your soils and your oceans, and that's what happens with it? And people say the problem that's happening with climate change, our climate is changing. It's changing because of our relation to the sun. It's changing because of the a lot of people won't know this. There's 1 million active volcanoes under our oceans around the world. That has a big impact as well. You've got the way the Earth moves around the sun, that impacts as well. We've to say that climate change, the Paris Agreement. Now it was signed up, the Paris Agreement, to reduce emissions. You got Russia, China, India, Brazil, and the UK and the USA that are actually are not meeting their targets. And then with the European Union, they're the 6 biggest emitters, and they're not even meeting their targets at all. We are 1% of the world's emissions, 1%, less than 1%. And we are destroying our economy, our standard of living, way of life, industries, manufacturing, jobs, and the farming sector. For what? When as you said, China is emitting over 30%. They're not bound to it. China and India are regarded as undeveloped nations. So therefore, they're not going to be held to account. And they can just emit whatever they want to. China is putting out 2 billion carbon emissions a year, more than us. We shut everything down today, it will never change anything. So I want the people out there, go and do your research. Understand what you're talking about, or know what you're talking about, and understand the impact it's having on your electricity bills. Is all going up. And I'll tell people another thing out there, because all of this scam, it's a scam to get votes, and it's the scientists out there are following along, because these scientists now have jobs that they'd never have jobs before. So if they're in well-paid positions, they've got a vested interest in all this to go along with this BS. And then on top of it, from all this subsidies of whether it's wind and solar, the Australian government has paid out in excess of $29 billion over the last 10 years in subsidies to these foreign multinational companies that have structured themselves to take your money, which could be better spent.
It's just noses in the trough, it just keeps
perpetuating
over and over and
that's
over.
right. So, sorry, I'm not for this. Okay, I'm not for the Paris Agreement. I would walk away from it tomorrow, as Donald Trump did. He's not interested in that. Common sense will prevail with all this. Once the people wake up and understand what is happening to you, you're being led like sheep to the slaughter. And that's exactly what's happening.
Well, that would be, yeah, we'll hear more about sheep tomorrow, of
Yes.
course. Pauline, climate change, you will be going down to Bunbury, southwest of Western Australia, and there is quite a lot of controversy there. They're talking about wind farms and putting that down in some of the most pristine countryside and oceanside around. Western Australia, we have, you know, the Burrup Peninsula is absolutely rich in gas. Labor Premier Alan Carpenter set Western Australia up with a guaranteed supply for domestic markets, which is a little bit different to what we have on the East Coast.
That's right. It is very different, because that was set up in the 1970s, and that was a 15% domestic gas supply, which was only just renewed recently. I'm fully aware of this. That's been my argument about the whole gas, which they did nothing about. It's only my pushing that we were only getting $300 million a year tax out of that, because my pushing with it, with Turnbull, Morrison and Albanese, when I had my first meeting with him, that now we've got in the last budget last year $2.4 billion out of it, and they're increasing it now because they're PRRT, but I won't go into detail with that, but that's another thing that I've been able to do. So we have an abundance of gas.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So the wind turbines, let me just tell some people some facts here.
Sure.
A wind turbine takes 270 tonnes of coke and coal to build for the steel. To put it in the ground, 800 tonnes of concrete. Tell me what that does to your environment. Then you cannot, the only way to get rid of it, you've got to bury it in the ground. You can't, it's not used for anything else past its lifespan. Same as solar panels. They'll only last a certain period of time. They've got to be buried in the ground. Then you have cadmium, which comes out of it, which are poison in the solar panels, which will leach the soil. Then on top of that, with the solar panels and wind farms, they produce between 19 and 30% of power. That's all they deliver. The rest of your power is propped up by your coal-fired power stations or your gas.
We had a public holiday, not the recent one last week, but about 2 months ago, Western Australia, for the first time in a long time, without an adverse weather event, we were subject to power blackouts. In Western Australia, with the gas that we have up in the Burrup Peninsula, we just shouldn't have that. But this is the Labor agenda, both state and federal, putting in or shutting down coal mines, shutting down gas development and so on and so forth, when there is absolutely no reason, I mean, to do so. We've got this push for electric vehicles, and it just goes on and on and on. I mean,
Electric vehicles, there was 1,000 fires last year, electric vehicles going up in flames. You've got Tesla now, they've got hundreds, thousands of vehicles sitting on docks, they can't sell it. Electric vehicles are on the downside worldwide, and they can't power them. They are a danger. And I'll tell you another thing, I don't trust them, because the computers they've put in electric vehicles, they're all looking at these 15 and 30 minute cities. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
You can't travel, so you have an electric vehicle, and then when they say switch off, you can't drive any further, they will control you, how far you go. There's a plan, people. Understand, it's about controlling the people. Remember, Schwab said from the World Economic Forum, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And that's why your governments of the day are doing it too. Until you wake up yourselves and stop voting these idiots in and get people who've got your well-being at heart. I'm a grassroots Aussie. I love my country. Do you think I'm going to sit back and not have a say and pull them up and have my say? You know, why be in politics? This is why I came, got into it, because I'm sick of the way my country is going. And I just feel people aren't speaking up and got a voice. And a lot of people say to me, gee, you've got the guts to say what I'm thinking. Well, we can all have that say. It's up to each and every one of us. Make sure you make your vote count.
And I think I'll end, Pauline, there's definitely in recent polls, not only, well, it's hard to measure in Western Australia because Ben Dawkins has only just recently come on representing the party, but you have the state election. certainly on the East Coast, there is a growing appetite. One Nation is polling incredibly well, which suggests that there is a thirst, there is an appetite. People are very disillusioned with the two major parties. There needs to be that choice, as you say, the balance of power. I want to end on this note, Pauline, and that's to talk about the Pauline Hanson Please Explain cartoons.
Right, yes.
And I saw the article that Chris Kenny did in relation to that, and the great behind the scenes look. Did you ever think that a cartoon series, I mean, that team is just absolutely incredible with what they do, but the messaging, do you see that the way that they're putting out the key issues is in a format, as you say, rather than people looking at cat videos and giving that 10,000 likes, they're now looking at your content, talking about these issues and the lights switching on by watching the cartoons.
We've only put it out, and this is James Ashby who came up with this idea, and we got in touch with this company. We never did something like it, but not to this political cartoon as we have put out. So anyway, we're in our third season now, third year of doing the cartoons. So anyway, we were targeting the young ones between 18 and 35. Basically, it was to do that because they are disengaged from politics. But what we've done, what we find now is it's a wide range of people, you know, even kids younger than that, and the older generation love the cartoons. So it's putting out a clear message. And I'll put it to you, we actually cover a lot of what the political parties are doing. Before it was a coalition, or this time it's Albanese. But we have never been challenged over it. Okay, so they try to challenge us over the NDIS one.
Because it's true.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, they can't dispute it.
That's right.
It's in a satire manner, but the facts are there. You're hitting on the facts.
So we're informing people of what is actually happening. So it's woken a lot of people up, and that's why we're doing the cartoons. We don't charge for it, it's free. That's why we do. We prop up the cost of these cartoons, which are not cheap, I can tell you, but we do it through fundraising, being membership, or we're through our sales, you know, on the, you know, the One Nation gin or rum or other sales that we have. So that's how we do, and because I think it's a service to the Australian people to keep you informed so that you do wake up, let the light switch on and understand. And I can't say this more, another thing that I'm going to be pushing is to inform people how to make their vote count with the preferences. A lot of people don't understand how the preference system works. So I'm going to be putting out that out to people to understand, you know, how people make a stupid comment, oh, but you're preferencing the Labor Party. No, I don't preference the Labor Party. No, I don't preference the Liberal Party. You mark the ballot paper. You send your preferences where you want to send them. I don't.
Yeah. But they need that underpinning knowledge to understand where it's floating.
The political parties have kept people dumbed down all these years, so they don't understand politics, they don't understand how the local, state and federal governments work, they don't understand how the preferencing system works. They've kept them dumbed down. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what I'm going to try and do. Wake people up, take an interest.
The old KISS theory, you can't beat that. You can find the Pauline Hanson, the cartoon series on
YouTube,
Pauline Hanson, Please Explain.
YouTube,
also on YouTube, now on X, Twitter. And,
or on the Facebook page. So they come out every Friday. Oh, the next one's coming out tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Any reveals? Or?
No, I can't reveal it because you know what? I only do the voiceover when I've actually got a part in it. So I haven't done the voiceover this week, so I'm not in it.
Ah, okay. There we go. Well, there's an exclusive. I can tell you that still tune in. So Pauline, there is some engagements. You have one on Saturday. There is a function that perhaps people they can jump onto the website and still look for tickets.
Look, I know that one of the functions going to it was at a pub, and I think that's been booked out.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay.
we have got a luncheon in Perth on Saturday. You'll have to go to the website. They've picked me up.
Is that open to the public or members only?
No, it's open to the public. So it's in Perth. On Saturday lunchtime. I think that's still available, and I think we have another function where I'm going to Bunbury and I'm going to Mandurah. So
you can look up Rod Caddy's on Facebook. He has a link to the function on Saturday. Yep. I think it's kicking off at about 11 a.m. Where there's canapé lunch. They can come and talk to you, meet you. jump onto Facebook, have a look at that for Rod Caddy's page to find that link. But Pauline, thank you very much for your patience. It's been a big day for you, having come over from Queensland with the time difference. Thank you for coming into the studio of Freedom Media at WA. I've got, I always just sort of mention Clayton and Alexandra behind the scenes. Yeah. Clayton's been with Freedom Media for a good sort of 2.5 years. He's got some other projects that he's going to be moving on. So Clayton, thank you very much. My friend, without you behind producing this, we wouldn't be able to get this content out. But Pauline, enjoy your trip in Western Australia. Enjoy tomorrow. Country life is certainly will be welcoming, and there is opportunity for people to come in and see you.
Oh, most definitely. No, thanks for having me. It's been great to talk to you. I hope people have been enlightened a little bit more about what's actually happening in politics. But if you want to know more, who knows what I'm going to talk about at these functions. And I'm not scripted. What you see is what you get. And if you
exactly
want
as this, you know, that's
so
there's no pre-arranged talking points.
Come along and listen. Yep. Meet other people, like-minded people. You might be surprised. You might enjoy yourself. Usually people do.
And I think that I will just reiterate on that point. It is important that people know this isn't staged. Apart from you coming in, the talking points were my talking points.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
so
an offer that you've...
yeah, no, so what you've just thrown at me.
That, yeah, so there we go. You can't get any more genuine and sincere than that. So on that note, yes, good evening. Thank you for those watching.
Thank you.
We will go back through and have a look at your comments and keep them coming. Like and share this this stream, and you can check in or check out tomorrow for the Pauline Hanson Please Explain One Nation cartoons, and keep those going. Good evening.